Hey, Jay Cottrell here, real estate agent with eXp Realty, and welcome to another monthly market update where I go more in depth on current market and what experts are predicting the national market's going to head, and also work with some of our local data to kind of break that down for you as well. So today we are going to look at talking about mortgage rates because that's on everybody's mind. Where are they possibly headed? What does that mean for the housing market? We're going to look at home sales trends and price trends on a national level. And then we're going to talk about things more on a local level to show you what the local data here is showing and what I think it means for the future of our local market. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, before we really dive into it, first I wanted to let you know that my summer buyer and seller guides are available. So if you would like a free copy, just let me know. I would be glad to send you one. And you can even leave me a little message in the comments below if you'd like to receive one as well. So for the next 20 or 30 minutes, I'm going to walk you through some of the hottest topics in real estate right now. You see, I believe in a well-prepared and a well-educated client. So every month I do these monthly market reports so that you and all my clients can be the most educated on real estate topics that matter to you. And I also do them for me because it forces me to take a deeper dive on the data on a monthly basis than just what I'm seeing in the market weekly. So we're going to talk about where we are at in this year here in June, almost halfway through, and we're starting to see a little bit of a shift in the market, and we're going to talk about interest rates. We're going to talk about where the market sits right now and ultimately what's ahead today. Sorry if I'm repeating myself, but just want to reiterate. And then we're going to break down some local market data for you to know how all this sits with us here locally in the Tri-Cities. So let's jump right in, make the best use of our time. We'll start here with this statement. It's all been about mortgage rates. If we think about the first 6 months of this year, the market has been defined by rising mortgage rates. There's an old saying, when rates rise, they take the elevator, and when they come down, they take the steps. And it's no doubt true about gas prices too. If you think about it, when gas prices go up, they take the elevator, but when they come down, they definitely take the steps. And no doubt we're seeing this quick and dramatic rise in mortgage rates right now. So let's take a look at what's happening with mortgages. This is the weekly monitor from Freddie Mac. The average 30-year fixed was at 5.09% on June 2nd. Sam Cater, the chief economist, said this: mortgage rates continue to inch downward this week, but are still significantly higher than last year, affecting affordability and purchase demand. Heading into the summer, the potential home buyer pool has shrunk and supply is on the rise, and the housing market is normalizing. This is welcome news following unprecedented market tightness over the last couple of years. But let's talk about that phrase that I just used, normalizing, because I think that's the most accurate description of what's happening to the housing market as a nation and also to ours here locally. We're not seeing a bubble bursting. We're not seeing a crash. We are not seeing a decline. We are seeing the market normalize or get back to normal. During the past few years, the pendulum has swung so far in one direction that the rebound just gets us back to even. And that's what's happening with mortgage rates as well. They're getting back to more historical normal levels after being at such ridiculously low levels. Now, this week, the Fed raised key rates by 0.75% or 75 basis points. Now, that doesn't mean mortgage rates have increased that much because the federal rate affects more short-term lending. What rate the Fed charges banks to loan them money, what rates banks charge each other to loan each other money, your credit card rates, your other short-term interest rates like auto loans and home equity lines of credit and things like that. Mortgages are much more long-term rates and are much more tied to the bond market, which we'll get into later. Also clipped in here on May 19th, where he said, economic uncertainty is causing mortgage rate volatility. And I think that's been the story up until now. There's a lot of economic uncertainty, a lot of things, inflation, instability in the world, what the Fed is doing. All these things are happening, causing mortgage rate volatility. And one thing I want to say is, anytime there is uncertainty, it makes people very wary of making very large purchases. I mean, that's kind of a no duh statement, right? When you don't know what the world's going to look like in 6 months, you tend to not want to make big purchases or make big decisions in the midst of that uncertainty. So I think you're seeing this happen in the market across the country, and also with adjustable rate mortgages. There's still good pricing there on a 5/1 ARM, and a good product for those that are looking and it fits for them. So back in the housing crisis, adjustable rates got a bad name because the rates kept going down, down, down. And they knew that they were low, so you didn't want to have your super, super, super low rate adjust higher when the market shifted. But now what we're looking at right now is they are a lower rate than the 30 and 15-year fixed. So there's still good pricing out there on adjustable mortgages if that's right for someone that you're working with or someone that is looking to buy right now. So, if you know you're only going to be in the house that you're buying for 5 years or less, it could be a great option to get a real cheap interest rate right now, especially since the rates are comparably lower than other fixed rate mortgages. But also maybe a good option for someone that gets relocated by their company often. But anyways, I digress. Let's look at the rate environment going all the way back to the beginning of the year. This is the weekly monitor from Freddie Mac. The average 30-year fixed was at 5.9%. And why is this not working? Sorry, technical difficulties. All right. This is going Okay, technical difficulties over. Sorry about that. Hate it when PowerPoints are smarter than you are. Anyways, this is going back to December 30th in 2021. We wrapped up the year with 3.1% in the average 30-year fixed mortgage rate. And we've sort of seen this quick and dramatic rise in interest rates over the first several months, where we started to clearly plateau sometime around the third week in April. In the last several weeks since then, we've kind of moved horizontally versus up, and that's a good thing. We don't want to continue to see this rapid mortgage rate increase as it starts to eat into affordability. It eats into the purchasing power that consumers have when they buy a home. But we can clearly see this plateauing trend. What we can say is, have rates peaked? What we can't say is have rates peaked, and what we can't say if rates are, nobody's got a crystal ball. I'm going to talk in just a minute about what's ahead, but you could clearly see that there's a plateauing in rates where we've moved horizontally over the past several weeks instead of continued the crazy climb. The average 30-year fixed 5.09%. Again, this was as of June 2nd. We've had a couple more weeks now, and honestly, it takes someone to prepare for these that I just didn't have time to look it up. But let's look at it on a trend level. So we're below where we've been in previous decades before this, going all the way back to the 70s. And I think this is important because sometimes in our business and sometimes in our own lives, we think, hey, well, the interest rate is 5% right now. But be thankful, because back in the 80s, it was 12.7%. And I've heard of people that paid 20% mortgages back in the 80s. So though we do need to acknowledge there are a lot of people that have gotten into, one, the real estate business over the past 2 years, but also people that have just become homeowners and just started their first home search. So we have to acknowledge that this interest rate environment is higher than they've ever seen before. And we need to listen and understand that. We need to understand because we also need to bring them to perspective. Certainly 5% on a 30-year fixed for anybody that's been around for some time is still a very, very good rate. It's all about perspective. But certainly seeing the shock of that in the first few months of this year, the first half of this year, like I said, first half of this year will be defined in the real estate business and in the home market by rising interest rates. The next thing I'll say, interest rates, the expert advice on this for the last 50 years, the 30-year fixed mortgage rate has followed the 10-year treasury. So mortgage rates tend to follow longer term investments like bond markets, not short term interest rates like what the Fed charges. And this graphic shows that. So what we've seen this year is we've seen the 10-year Treasury rise. And I'll show you this. This looks at the 10-year Treasury yield as compared to the 30-year fixed mortgage. And we've seen the 10-year Treasury yield rise since January and start to flatten out like we see in interest rates. If you go back in time, you'll see that the rise and fall of the 30-year fixed mortgage rate and the rise and fall of the 10-year Treasury have been very closely correlated to each other. Now, the spread changes at times, but the average spread since 1972 has been 1.7 points. Well, where are we right now? Well, as of the first of this month, 2.2 was the average spread, or the spread between the 10-year Treasury yield and the 30-year fixed. As of yesterday, the 10-year Treasury increased more. It was around 3.2 for most of the day. So we'll have to see if we go 2.2 above that, then that would put mortgage rates at 5.4 or 5.5. But we're going to have to continue to watch that as we go. And I've got some information as well about what's ahead for mortgage rates from the Mortgage Bankers Association. And again, there's that current spread, or the spread of a couple weeks ago, of 2.2. So no doubt the first half of this year will be defined by rising interest rates. The other thing I would say is interest rates have risen. As we've seen things happen in the real estate market, this question starts to come up. Are we in a housing market correction? There's an article that came out a couple of weeks ago. I think it was Mark Zandi wrote it and said we're in a full-blown correction. I'm going to answer that question for you, but whether it's rising interest rates or existing home sales are down, or are we in a market correction, or has the real estate market peaked? All of these headlines that people start to read that then become concerned with, we always say headlines do more to terrify in a lot of these scenarios than they do to clarify what's actually happening in the real estate market. And we all know headlines are there to be attention grabbers. Half the time, the majority of the time when you read the article, the headline seems completely detached from the main premise in the article. So one, I would encourage you to actually read the full articles. Don't just go by the headlines. Don't just go by the little snippets that you see, because again, those are intended to those are clickbait, intended to get you to read the article, but actually read the article and see what the full data suggests. Anyways, so are we in a housing market correction? The quick answer to that, experts say, no, we are not. And why is that? Well, the technical definition of a correction of any sort is a decline of 10% or greater in the price of a security asset or financial market. So if you want to change the definition of a correction, then you can, and you could maybe say that. But if you go with the technical definition, we're not in a housing market correction, and you can say that confidently. Why is that? Experts are forecasting almost 9% appreciation in residential real estate this year. If you think about that historically, we've seen about a 3.8% appreciation in homes in this country that shot all the way up in 2020 and 2021. And making these sort of anomaly years in real estate. And we're still getting very healthy appreciation this year so far. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So not a correction there. Here's the word I would be using more. The phrase I'd be using as I talked about the market right now, and as I talk to my clients about the market, is that the housing market is at a turning point. We're at a turning point. We're starting to see signs of new direction. And this is from Danielle Hale with Realtor.com. But the ball is still in the seller's court in most housing markets. Now, I'm going to give you some information in just a minute that shows where we're heading and where clear signs are. But let's remember this. We're at a turning point right now, coming out of two anomaly years in the real estate business and in the real estate market. No doubt about that. But we are slowing, normalizing as far as the housing market is concerned. But the ball is still in the seller's court, and we're still in a seller's market, and we're going to be that way for a while. There's still, in just about every market and those that I talk to, more buyers than there are available homes for sale. But buyer preference is changing. More about that later. So what does this look like? I've pulled a couple of slides that you've seen before if you follow me on social media or if you've watched these videos before. The first is from Showing Time, and I think that it's very interesting. This is a look at Showing Time going all the way back to the beginning of 2019. That's the gray area. And the first couple of months of 2020, I'm going to call pre-pandemic. And then the blue section is everything since the pandemic hit, up until the most recent information, which was April. Now, I know we're here in June. You're going to say, well, April doesn't matter, and it's going to come down from there. And I would agree. I would agree, but that's the most recent information we have. Here would be my case in point in this graphic and why I believe it makes sense to use it. We're clearly heading back somewhere that's going to be pre-pandemic level demand. Again, normalizing. We're heading back to normal levels. So not going back to pre-pandemic prices. Nobody's saying that. But if you look at demand pre-pandemic, certainly we're going to come off the highs of 2020 and 2021 back to pre-pandemic level demand, which, oh, by the way, 2017, 18, and 19, great years in the residential real estate in this country. But this just shows a visualization of demand where we've been. Again, two anomalous years in real estate in 2021, where interest rates dropped to absurdly low numbers. The meaning of home changed across this country, and we saw demand and we saw prices increase because of the lack of supply that we've never seen before in this country. So where are we heading in demand? Back to pre-pandemic levels. Let's also go with the next headline that accompanies this. Are we in a market correction? Existing home sales are down, so let's look at existing home sales. This is as of April, the seasonally adjusted rate, 5.6 million homes. 5.3. Most recently here in April, seasonally adjusted 5.6 million units in existing home sales. So if we look at that from a demand perspective, from an existing home perspective, really what we're looking at is a situation heading back to where we were prior to the pandemic. And certainly the pandemic spurred the real estate market, and we go into all the reasons. I think everybody that's watched these reports and followed me on social media knows that there's been all kinds of information about this. We eat in our we eat in our home, we school our kids in our home, we worked at home, and we know some of those changes are sticking around well after the pandemic. We certainly know the drop in interest rates fueled people that wanted to buy and said now is the time for a lot of different reasons. And so as interest rates have risen, starting to moderate the market brings us back to pre-pandemic levels, again, normalization. But if you were to start to look at where have we been in the market, where we are, most recent information, average days on market as of April, 17 days in this country. Still a very hot, I would call white hot market. So this this data, 17 days, is the amount of time it took a home from the date it was listed to it becoming under contract. So our local MLS doesn't necessarily track that. So when I give you days on market with local data, I want you to understand that's from the day it was listed to the day it was closed. So that includes that entire time period of when it was under contract as well. But anyway, so we're coming on this white hot market into maybe just a hot market right now. 17 days on the market. The average number of offers, 5.5 offers on a home. And that's very true here locally. So as you look at all the information, as you look at everything out there, the headlines that are out there hitting consumers, those that are thinking about buying, those that are thinking about selling and getting afraid, this is what you need to understand. We're still in a seller's market. There are still more buyers than there are homes to purchase. But again, we are seeing things change. We're headed back to pre-pandemic levels in sales volumes, which were great years in real estate to begin with. But let's talk about this third topic. What's ahead? So nobody's got a crystal ball in this business. And anybody that says they do, be wary of them. I certainly do not. Nevertheless, I'm going to do my best to look ahead and see what experts are saying about what's around the corner. Because what is the best predictor of future behavior? Past behavior. It's all we have to go by. It's hard to believe we're in June right now, halfway through the year in 2022, looking towards the second half. Certainly in the first half, we've seen a shift in residential real estate coming out of the last couple of years. Again, a lot of people ask what is ahead. Every single person I interact with eventually asks me this question. So let's see what experts are saying is ahead. First quote here is from Mike Frantantoni, sorry if I butchered your name, chief economist at the Mortgage Bankers Association. He says, mortgage rates are likely to plateau near current levels. I'm going to pause there. So what he's saying is mortgage rates are likely to plateau. We can already see plateau. Can't tell you if it's a peak or not, but I can definitely tell you it's plateauing. His perspective is they're likely to plateau where they are in the low fives here. And I always tell people, if you really want to know more about mortgage rates, mortgage interest rates, you need to talk to a mortgage banker, not a real estate agent. The financial markets have attempted to price in the impact of the Fed's action over the cycle and are likely to also price in the economic slowdown that will result. Once we are past this rate spike and associated volatility, the NBA expects that potential home buyers may be more willing to re-enter the market. So home buyers may, in a rising rate environment, go, whoa. We've talked about how it has the ability to take people off the fence. Some will say we need to buy before rates get higher. Others will say I'm out, and we're not going to do it. But as rates plateau, this volatility and anxiety subsides. And what they're saying is they expect more potential home buyers to be willing to enter the market once things kind of plateau and normalize a bit. So just a minute ago, we looked at existing home sales. This is a look at total home sales forecasted this year from Fannie Mae and the MBA and NAR, everybody we look at. Again, this is nationally. Anywhere from 6.9 million homes sold this year to 6.1 million. To put that in perspective, in 2021, we sold 6.9 million homes in this country. And most would say in the interest rate environment we're in, we're likely to see that impact on the market to the tune of about 10%. So as interest rates rise, we're likely going to see that impact on the market. If you take 6.9, it's about 700,000 homes less than we would sell this year. So these forecasts, 6.1 to 6.9, I think all have to do with what happens with interest rates, what happens with consumer demand, what happens with economic uncertainty. But that gives you perspective on total home sales this year, forecasted to be a very, very good year for residential real estate. The only predictor we have, again, of future behavior is past behavior. So that's what everybody's doing here. Which to my next point about what's ahead, experts don't believe the market is in a bubble or a crash is in the cards like during the Great Recession. The nation is still suffering from a housing shortage that has reached crisis proportions at a time when many millennials are reaching the age when they start to consider homeownership. And that's likely to keep home prices high. We've talked about this before. We're not in a bubble. A crash is not coming. But what's important here, and I would pay attention to in this quote, is that millennials are reaching the age when they start to consider homeownership. So millennials are working through the peak home buying years. We know they are the second largest generation behind the baby boomers, just behind them just a little bit. They're also the HGTV generation, which is a whole other issue that affects their buying behavior. But anyways, as they move through, they're driving demand. We know we don't have the number of homes on the market for the number of people that want to buy them. That's not going away tomorrow. That's going to take a long time to normalize out. And that lack of supply keeps upward pressure on prices across the country. So those that are wondering, are we in a correction? Are homes going to lose value? This shows the real world perspective of what's happening with millennials and the demand they're bringing to real estate. I think when we think about how is the real estate market, one thing that's a real fever pitch right now is the call for, are we heading into a recession in this country? With the Fed's action of rising the Fed funds rate, which, by the way, is not the 30-year fixed mortgage rate. Once again, that's intended to slow the economy. If that's not done precisely, that puts us potentially into a recession, and we'll kind of watch that going forward. But if we think about this topic, and I think it's one we need to engage on, we need to talk about the recession. So recession is defined by the National Bureau of Economic Research, and the technical definition is a significant decline in economic activity spreading across the economy, lasting more than a few months. And they go on to say that there's also kind of an industry definition that we have 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP, gross domestic product. But defined by the National Bureau of Economic Research, it's a much broader definition. So as you get into the technical elements of it, not suggesting that we need to become experts or that I'm trying to become an expert on the technical elements of our entire financial economy. But I think every time somebody who's a homeowner hears a recession, they hear a housing crash, and they hear of the housing crisis they hear that because of what happened back in 2008. But typically, the housing crisis or housing crash and a recession are not necessarily synonymous. So, again, if you watch these videos or follow me on social media, you're well aware of this. But I found this graphic, which I think illustrates a great point. It's a study where CoreLogic went back to the early 80s to prove that a recession doesn't equal a housing crisis. I'm sure you could go back further than that. It really just depends on where you can get the data. But since the 80s, there's been 6 recessions in this country. And what happened, you can see it just in the graphic. 4 out of the 6 times home prices actually appreciated during the recession. 2 times they depreciated. The early 90s, it was less than 2%. Let's just call that a wash, marginal depreciation. But what everybody remembers is 2008, when homes lost almost 20% in value. A lot of people were hurt then, a lot of family members. It's fresh in our minds. A lot of people that maybe we know and maybe ourselves had to make bad decisions on housing or do something like a short sale, a deed in lieu, foreclosure, whatever it was to get ourselves out from underneath those homes. So when they hear recession, that's fresh in our mind because it just happened. And so we think about housing prices bottoming out again, but we have to remember why home prices bottomed out after 2008 during that recession. It was because the housing market was the cause of the recession. And we all remember the reasons why for that, with the mortgage-backed securities, free money, no verification, all that stuff. But the reason why home prices crashed during the 2008 recession again was because the housing market's what caused the recession. So many people think every time we hit a recession, homes lose value. That's simply not true. And I'll wrap that up with a quote. The quote is from Shivani Peterson, a mortgage expert. He goes, "If you're looking to buy a home, I would still recommend you do so, even at higher interest rates, because we have no reason to believe that home prices will stop appreciating. Home values going up is only a problem if you're trying to buy. When you own, it's a gift." That's a great perspective. When you own a home and prices are rising, that means you're increasing equity. And we've talked extensively about equity. The difference between a renter and a home buyer and a homeowner, and the difference is their net worth. So now let's pull into the neighborhood and get closer to the end of our journey here together. Let's look at some other interesting data, and then I'll end on some local data and statistics to give you some local perspective on all of this. We'll start with some interesting national data. This graphic shows the percentage change in home prices going all the way back to June 2012. As you can see, home price appreciation has pretty much normalized at a rate of 5% or just under until the pandemic. That's when the meaning of home changed for many people, and it caused a lot of moving around, looking for new homes, movement from cities to suburbs, from higher priced regions to lower priced regions, from smaller homes to bigger homes. It was really threw the market out of balance, and it did it quickly. So again, we've got a lot of ground to make up if we want to get back to that normal rate of 5%. This graphic shows you what effect all of the movement had on inventory levels, or the number of homes available for sale. So as you can see, low inventory has not just been a recent short-term problem. We've had low inventory going all the way back to January 2015. And why is that? Because the 2008 financial crisis put a lot of home builders out of business, never to re-enter the home building market again. So we lost all of that inventory because nothing was getting built relative to other times in history. So it's also the migration during the pandemic exacerbated a problem that already existed. So we already had low inventories. This migration just exacerbated it. And it will take a major correction for inventory levels to make positive gains, which is why most experts don't see this going away anytime soon. And again, also why they predict home prices to continue to appreciate, though at a much slower pace than we've seen recently. And now to end with our local market right here in the Tri-Cities. So I like to start with the expert and national information first, because I feel it helps give us a perspective on that we can look at our local market and that current data. So moving on. This graphic gives us a good picture of what is happening here locally. So as you compare this year all the way to the beginning of the graph, which is 12 months ago, June of 2021, you can see that in all listing categories, the numbers are below where we were last year. So in the number of active listings, sold listings, listings currently under contract. However, the number of sold listings has been relatively steady over those 12 months, at least compared to the ups and downs and major swings of the others. So when you look at this year, though, we started out the year with a declining number of active listings for sale in our market, which is the gold line. Then we began to add more and more new listings to the market, which is the bluish gray line, which initially resulted in more sales, but not more inventory. So buyers finally had more homes to choose from, and the market just gobbled up those new listings. Then in March, the number of active listings began to climb as new listings continued to increase, but sold listings kind of plateaued and actually slightly declined over the last couple of months. This is the beginning of the market shifting and the market moving toward a balanced market, again, a normalization. However, if there is still a long way to go, however, there is still a long way to go to get back, as this next graphic will illustrate. But as of all the other data has suggested, we have been seeing a slowdown in the number of showings per listing, the number of offers per listing, as well as homes staying on the market longer and requiring price reductions in order to sell. And I'll show you what all that looks like here in a little bit. But anecdotally, I'm also seeing more of a willingness for buyers to stand up for themselves, finally. What I mean by this is that buyers are no longer willing to waive inspections and appraisals in order to win the bidding war. Buyers are no longer satisfied with just getting a house. They're willing to wait for the one that they really want and are willing to make a pass on homes with issues that come through on the inspection or homes that just are not move-in ready. So I'm seeing a preference shift in buyers where they're just not willing to put up with the craziness anymore that they had, especially that they had to endure over the last 18 to 24 months. I'm also seeing buyers that bought a house in 2020 or 2021 because it was the only one they could find. They're starting to look at selling that house and going out to find the house that they actually want. So there's all kinds of dynamics at play right now and going on with this market that's making a bit of a turn. So this is an inventory comparison. Um, the gray line here is estimated based on the sales rate. So of how many active listings there would need to be in order for there to be a balanced market. So I look at the monthly sales, how many homes sell per month, how many, based on how many active listings there were during that month. It's a simple math problem. If we're at 1 month of inventory and 6 months is a balanced market, then we need to multiply that out to figure out what 6 months of inventory would look like. So as you can see, where neither sellers nor buyers had an advantage is a buyer's market. That's that gray line at top. So that's that calculation. So at that level, there's adequate inventory of homes for sale for the number of buyers actively searching for a home, and there's not really an advantage on one side. If you want to look at it, it's a balanced market. So as you can see, even though we've had a few months of increasing inventory, we are still well below what would be considered a balanced market. In fact, based on May numbers, May active listings were only at 19% of what a balanced market would be. So there is still a large gap to close for things to go to get back to normal. Here's how May sales looked compared to May of 2021 and what the year-to-date numbers look like compared to the same period last year. As you can see, prices are up, inventory is down, and days on market are less than last year. But let's put this in perspective. As if I haven't hit home about home prices not being headed for a decline enough, this graphic shows how median monthly sales prices for the past 12 months compared to the previous 12-month period. The gold bars being the current period and the gray bars being that same period 12 months before. So as you can see, prices have continued to be higher than they were last year. To put this in further perspective, here's the same info just broken down by percentage. So you can see we started out with January sales prices that were 7.6% higher than January of 2021. And now May sales prices were 31.6% higher than May of 2021 during the height of pandemic sales activity. Again, this is a function of persistent low inventory and the mortgage rate hikes pushing buyers off the fence. It will be interesting to see where we end up at the end of this year. Going back to this data, year-to-date sales prices, if you look at the year-to-date numbers, are still up 19% from the same period last year. So if you remember, the experts are predicting around a 9 to 10% price appreciation for the year end of 2022. Now that's nationally. So there will be some regions that have higher price appreciation than that. Some will have lower, and there may be one or two markets that have slight depreciation, especially those that we all know the markets that tend to go really high up and really high back down quick. They tend to be the resort communities, the uh, um, coastal communities, and the vacation places like that. But anyways, so looking at our year-to-date appreciation of 19%, we would have to have zero appreciation in prices over the next 6 months to hit that 9 to 10% number. So sales prices that are similar to the last 6 months of 2021 for a local price appreciation to only be 9% by year end. I don't see that happening. Like I've mentioned several times, we are seeing a flattening of the curve for home prices, normalizing, as I've said before. Um, but I don't see that dropping enough to reduce our year end to a total of 9 to 10% for the year. Could be wrong. Like I said, nobody has a crystal ball. This graphic compares list price to sold price ratios. So what this is, it's a comparison of how much a home sold for compared to its list price. So for quick illustration, if a home was listed for sale at $100,000 but sold for $95,000, then its sold to list ratio would be 95%. Realtors use this important metric when helping home sellers price their property. This shows us the ratio for each of the previous 12 months. Now, the gray bar compares the sold price to the list price at the time the home went under contract, which could be lower than the original price of the home. The gold bar shows the original list price compared to the sold price. So again, it's comparing the sold price to the home's original list price. So while homes are selling at or slightly above list price, as you can see, that's not the whole story. They are not selling as close to their original list price. That means there are plenty of price reductions occurring before a home sells. And as I said, homes are sitting on the market longer, and some are having to reduce their price in order to sell. Another illustration that I think Another illustration that things are changing in our local market. Now, both of those ratios started going back up in April, but I'm guessing that's just a seasonal bump. We'll keep an eye on them to see if that continues beyond the peak home buying season, or if things start falling back down again. this is this compares the number of sales and homes for sale at or below the current median list price of $234,900. So it's looking at those at or above it. So as you can see, there are more homes selling that are below the median list price than above the median, or below the median sales price than above the median. However, there is more inventory of homes above the median. So this is creating a bit of an imbalance or a skew. To give you a better picture, here in this pie graph, the left shows the balance of homes sold at or below median price. So again, the gold sections are homes homes at or below median price. The gray is homes at or above median price. So the right shows the balance of homes currently, the left shows the balance of homes sold. The right shows the balance of homes currently for sale. As you can see, they're mirror images. So what about new listings? Well, as you can see, new listings entering the market are balanced almost evenly. So we have just as many new listings below the median sales price as we do above the median sales price. So what does this mean? A possible continued tightening of inventory below the current median sales price and a growth of inventory above the current median sales price. So as you can see, our absorption rate for homes below is at about 0.8 months or 3 weeks or so, while over it we were almost at a month and a half, almost double um, um, at the over median price. So in conclusion, I hope this information has been a help to you. Again, there are a lot of headlines out there, but I try to make sure my clients are aware of what is actually happening and what the experts are actually predicting, not the soundbite that was taken for a short headline or tweet. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. Remember, your support is very important to me. So if you like this video, please be sure to press the like button below. Subscribe to my channel if you have not already done so. And also do me the extra honor of sharing this video with your friends. as well. If you have any questions or like any clarifications over any of the information that I covered during this video, or just any other questions you have in general, please just reach out. Again, please remember my summer buyer and seller guides are out and ready. If you would like one, just let me know and I'll be sure to send it. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.